From personal ads to porn stars, astrology to testimonials, it's the hottest talk of talk radio. It's the Derek and Romaine Show.
Derek here, along with Romaine, and joining us once again, our returning champion and my cousin.
Your cousin?
Kane, that's right, cousin. Kane Lynch is back with us, and he has a new book out from Scholastic called Real Life. It is a graphic novel by the one, the only, Kane Lynch. And you can check him out on the web, cartooningwithkane.com, and that's Kane with a K. And he is on Twitter X and Instagram as Kane Icarus Lynch, because his dad predicted early on that he would fly too close to the sun.
Interesting.
Kane, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. So I posted about this on social media when you announced the news about your book. But honestly, I mean, to me, even bigger than winning an Oscar, having a book in the Scholastic Book Fair. You know, I know you grew up reading, I grew up reading, Romaine grew up reading. Like, nothing was more exciting as a kid than the Scholastic Book Fair.
I mean, who didn't live for the book fair?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's wild that like one of the promo things I did, it was like, here's the authors coming up and our next set of releases, and it was like me and R.L. Stine next to each other. You know,
That's crazy.
That's so exciting.
So, I mean, I have so many questions about the Scholastic Book Fair thing because, as a kid, it was my favorite day of the school year. Right? When the book fair rolled into town, or when you got the little papers and you got to order the books, and it was a whole thing. And I loved it. And part of it was I love books because my mom was a librarian. So, for me, that's the most awesome part. So here's my question for you. Are you going to ask for a copy of the little paper pamphlet that they give out at the schools that has your book on it? And are you going to frame it?
That is, I just visited the Scholastic office for the first time, and that was in retrospect, that's my big regret, is that I didn't demand one of those. So, yeah, I think I need to get on that.
I think you need to email someone and be like, listen, this is such a big deal to me. I need a copy of the little pamphlet. Because that's super exciting.
Yeah, it is. And, I think part of what's cool about doing kids stuff is there's so many things in the world that are all digital now and aren't how we remember them from back in the day. But they still do those physical catalogs just like they did back then.
And I'm sure kids get as excited today as they did when we were kids.
Yeah, that is a really fun thing. That kids love reading, kids love graphic novels, and I feel like parents are still a little confused by that. There was in the 50s, comic books were out of your brain, and then now we're like, no, these are actually maybe good for you. I'm still reading.
Yeah, my daughter, she doesn't like to just read normal books, but she loves a graphic novel, and she will sit down and read a graphic novel from cover to cover. And I'm like, whatever it takes to get her to read, I'm excited about. So I think graphic novels are great, and they can be just as compelling of books as a regular old book.
Yeah, I think you can have all the kind of narrative complexity, and the reading level can be just as challenging. It just kind of gives it another element, that visual art can be very stimulating and artistically purposeful too. So you're combining two mediums.
Now, talk about the genesis of the book, Real Life, because it is a bit based, even though it's R-E-E-L, it is a bit based on your own R-E-A-L life, right?
Yeah, it's definitely the merger of real life and real life. I don't know how to hit that vowel there. Yeah, so I had done a short comic for a website called The Nib that was about my actual family, and how I basically tracked down both of the first person my mom dated after my parents split up, and the person my dad left my mom for. And I hadn't talked to either of them in years. And then I managed to get both of them down with I was about to say tape recorder. It wasn't that long ago. With a recording device and get their side of the story. And that felt like a very adult thing to be doing, And actually at the time I was also developing kids comics, and I was sending pitches to these publishers and getting rejected. And then David Saylor, who's the head of the graphics, the comics division at Scholastic, just read this comic I did for adults that was honestly not super kid appropriate, but I think basically was like, I like your art and your family sounds weird, so let's go for it.
What a compliment.
Well,
Your family sounds weird.
Your family is weird, honestly. And as time has gone on, it has only gotten weirder. So, that's true.
Yeah. We can get into all the weirdness of, our part of the family, you and I. But, I think even just my immediate family, though, there was just like, I realized when I kind of like casually told stories to people, they'd be like, wait, what? And be like, oh, is that not normal? So the book is about a kid whose parents are splitting up, and it's unsettledly based on me, but it's set in the present day, and it is fictionalized in a lot of ways. And as all these new people are coming into his life, he decides to his best friend convinces him to make a documentary about it. So they're sort of like filming things as they're happening, and as they re-edit and recontextualize the footage, they start to understand different people's perspectives. So it has this kind of like introspective element to it, but also just a lot of wacky hijinks because it's about kids making movies.
Of course. But also, I mean, a lot of kids deal with their parents splitting up. And so even though this is so much your own experience, lived experience, I'm sure that a lot of it is very relatable for these kids, which is probably a big part of why Scholastic picked it up.
Yeah, I really appreciate that is surely a major factor for them, right? That is something that a lot of kids go through, and that they're looking to see themselves reflected in media, as so many people are in so many ways. And I do appreciate that they didn't push me in any way to have like a kind of like generic story about that, or like what you necessarily expect, because it is like, I think all great art has an element of being universal and also specific. And so I think they let the weirdness fly while also hopefully having some of those more relatable elements.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, one of the core elements here, and certainly I think that for any, media that is aimed at kids, that addresses a complex topic like divorce does, I think that what is interesting about your story is that you're putting it in the context of a kid understanding, they're trying to understand their parents better, understand their role in it. Because, this when parents split up, sort of the first thing they say to the kids is, this isn't about you. We love you. This is not about you. But it's hard for a kid not to internalize the breakup of a family around them because they only have their own family experience to go by. So I like that the book is really about sort of examining, what is happening, like a kid trying to solve this for themselves. Because I think that that's good for kids to see that's something that they can do. If they're feeling sort of, I don't know what to do in this situation, my parents are splitting up, who is this about? What is this? Like, it gives them an opportunity to see, there could be a positive introspection about this, about my family that can make me feel better about the whole situation, hopefully.
Yeah. I think something that one of the ways that, and this is not how divorce affects everybody, but right. I think for me as a kid, an effect it really had on me was sort of like, oh, there's two sides to every story. The way my dad's going to tell this and the way my mom's going to tell this are pretty different, and I love both of them. So, of course I have issues with my parents like anyone does, but I didn't think either of them was a terrible person. And so just sort of saying like, well, people can have good intentions and do things that hurt other people or what have you. And so I think that one of the themes of the book is kind of like people can be messy without being nefarious, and that can be hard for kids to wrap their minds around too.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, I mean, every divorce is different. I know that when, my parents divorced when we were pretty young. And so we don't really have, so young that we don't really have memories of them together. But my dad continued to remarry and had a series of bad marriages after that. So I got to, experience other marriages falling apart over time. And I gained a lot of perspective from that of, this is sort of how relationships begin and how they fall apart and how they end. Because when you're a kid, you're sort of born into the middle of the story. And so you don't really have the sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end part always.
That's true.
Yeah, that's also why I felt like I really wanted to do a version of my family as fiction, because it is like, there's always a joke about someone writing a character that's obviously based on their ex and then saying, oh, it's a composite character or whatever. But I felt like I wanted to be able to imagine those things a little bit. Like, it's pretty grounded in the main kid's perspective, but it was like, okay, I'm closer to the age of the parents than the kid now, right? So what would it be like to be the adults in the situation, kind of imagine what those interactions are like, what they're thinking and feeling.
And I mean, I think it probably is, it's probably good to visit this time in your life, then in the current time of your life, because you do, as you get older, have a very different perspective based on your own relationships and everything. And then also seeing your parents as other adults, not just as your parents. And you do gain other perspectives. Like, certainly, if I were writing about my childhood when I was 10, I would probably be writing a really different story than I would have written about my childhood at 35 or 40, you know what I mean? Because your perspectives really change a lot, and you have a much broader view of the way that adults interact with each other. That when you're a kid, a lot of it is really a mystery, because it's not about you and you don't care. But as an adult, you're like, oh, I understand all of this a lot better.
Yeah, and it's a, I don't know if therapeutic is too strong a word, but it's a meaningful exercise to try to imagine, like, okay, how would I behave if I was going through what my mom was going through then, or something? And I think a lot of the parents have a lot of me in them, in addition to my parents. I feel like even some of their, like, the toxic traits they exhibit may say more about me than about my parents.
Sure. Now, how do your parents feel about the book, and also sort of the fictionalized version of themselves?
Yeah, they've been pretty cool about it. I think it is, like, bless their hearts, me having a book out from a major publisher has maybe their excitement about that has maybe helped mitigate any other feelings.
Sure.
I think the level of fictionalization does help too. That in some ways it's led to some real conversations about what happened, but also I think the ways where they would take issue, they're like, well, it's not quite me, it's a character. There's literally a panel where in the background the dad character talks to my actual dad in a cameo. So I think maybe that level of distance helps me get away with it a little more.
That's funny.
But I have to imagine your parents must be, super, super proud about.
Of course they are.
Published.
Yeah, and it is like, it's a very quixotic thing to be doing. Be like, okay, well, I'm gonna make a career in comic books, and then, like, where does that actually lead you, and how does that turn into something that has the shape of an actual job? And they've always been very supportive, but I think this is an instance where it's easier to see the kind of fruits of that labor paying off. So that's been very nice.
Absolutely. For sure. What I find interesting, obviously, we didn't meet until now. I feel like it's been like 17 years, something like that. It's been a long time now.
Oh, gosh, right? Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, because I feel like it was 07, 08, like somewhere around there, right?
I think it was 2012. So, we could.
You know what? Maybe with you it was. I think with my siblings it was 07, 08.
Gotcha,
but you're right. Okay,
yeah.
So with you, which I was able to find you because your name was so unique, it made it much easier to find you in my genealogy searching. But that was a big help. But it has been quite a number of years now. But what I have found interesting, because my sister Laura has written a book about her life, and I have written 2 books about my life. And then spent 22 years talking about myself. And you have this book about yourself. So it is this interesting thread within our family of sort of memorializing ourselves in our own way.
Yeah. I feel like I've gotten to a point now where I am just fascinated, like kind of perversely fascinated by people who have extremely normal families.
Okay, that's funny. But do you really think that normal families exist? Because I'm not convinced they do.
That's probably true. They're probably just hiding their weird better. But I feel like some people, it is like the more you press, the more beige it gets, and that is just like kind of compelling in its own way, you know. But yeah, I do feel like there's just so many stories here, you know. So we have to tell them.
Well, I think sort of telling family stories has gone on, for a really long time. And even families that seem like to us now normal or indicative of a time period, like let's say, a classic like Little Women, right? We think of that now as sort of, well, this is a story of this time period during the Civil War. But the reality is, not everybody who was growing up then had only sisters and no brothers, father off in the war, mother taking care of everything when he wasn't around. Like, in a lot of ways, Louisa May Alcott was writing about her family, but also her family was just going to be different than lots of other people, even though there were probably some parallels that people felt. Part of what they tuned in for was that this family is different from mine. And even if you look at things like Our Town or Meet Me in St. Louis or, Cheaper by the Dozen, there's a long tradition of telling these sort of family stories. And part of the hook is what's unique about that family. But over time, you see that really what the element is that catches people's attention is the relatable components of it, ultimately, because the foundation of it is really about like the way families interact with each other, which are unique to every family, but also, very, very common within families too.
Yeah, the time period thing is interesting actually, because I decided to set this book in the present, and partially that was because I sort of wanted a marker that it was fiction, even though like people are laughing a little bit about how obviously the main kid is me, but it's like, he's got an iPhone in 6th grade. Okay, it's not me. Yeah. But I thought about like, when I was a kid, me and my friends made movies and there was no way to share that with people really. So we figured out, we rented a VCR and we transferred our movie onto a single VHS tape and convinced a single video store to carry our movie.
Wow.
And they agreed to do it, but only as a free rental because they didn't want to deal with money.
Right.
So that we told kids at school to go to this one video store that was in a different town and get the free VHS tape of our movie. And they did it. So it felt like a real feat, We felt like we'd hit the big time.
That's awesome.
And I kind of love that memory, and I feel like that could even be that could be a fun comic right there. But as soon as if I'd set the story in the 90s and it's about that kind of texture, suddenly that's what you're thinking about. You're not thinking about the family stuff.
Right. Well, and it might also be harder for a kid to understand what a video store is. But, it is, I actually think it is smart from a storytelling point of view, because there aren't necessarily elements of the story that have to be set in a different time period. And in some ways, you can use the current time period to create threads within the story that are relatable to kids today, like having a phone, because kids can make their own documentaries with their own phones now. And a lot of young kids are very influenced by what they see in social media. And when they get older, they're going to want to be, sort of how are they going to express themselves publicly, which is a big part of what young people deal with now, which when we were kids, other than your parents telling you, act nice in public or whatever it was, right? There was no public performance of yourself, really, the way that you're sort of expected to publicly perform yourself all the time in our modern era. So I think sort of addressing that as part of your story is a very modern thing.
Yeah, there's also a little bit of like a funny tension now where, if you're 12 years old, you hopefully aren't on social media yet, and many 12-year-olds I'm sure are, but they're officially, you're not supposed to use those things till you're 13. And so in the story, there's a little bit of a gulf between, there's a character who's 14 and she's all over TikTok and she thinks about making a movie in a very different way and has some kind of different concerns versus the younger kids who have a more kind of romanticized idea of what that means.
Right. because they haven't experienced the horrors of it yet.
Exactly, yeah. Which I think is also maybe why graphic novels are so big with that age range, because like when you're a little older, you get suckered into the social media hellscape, and then most adults don't read, But we have this little like beautiful period before that destroys our brains.
Yeah, it really is the like, it's the death of reading. It also, like for me as a writer, it makes it difficult to write. Like it's so easy to get sucked into streaming services and social media and email, like all these things, and it really can take you away from any creative process. But even just sort of, so much of our time now is spent not alone with ourselves or our thoughts, which is a big part of a creative process, but like you're in the car, there's music or talk radio playing, you're outside with your headphones on, like you're inside, there's
talk radio
stuff playing.
Is definitely the real problem. I think we can all agree.
Oh, without question. Yeah. It's very problematic.
Yeah. So, it's I think it's a struggle for everyone, but I think it is good that you are reaching kids at a point where they are not yet overwhelmed by those things. So they still have an opportunity to engage in this kind of creative process and, experience a book that they can then, think about their own lives and how they too could think through their own family life and, what they would do in that situation, which, I think is very healthy.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've like gotten professional reviews of the book, which have mostly been very positive, and then I know kids are buying it. I've sold it to kids even who are very excited to get autographed copies. Like I did not realize how much kids love autographs. Like one kid just didn't have a copy, so she asked me to sign a piece of wood. She was like, "Here's a pencil and a piece of wood. Will you sign this?" Like, sure, man. Okay. But I haven't yet had any like real conversations with kids about how they're receiving it. There's a way where like, well, maybe the Kirkus review doesn't matter as much as the 10-year-old's review. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, so the autograph thing is funny because I remember as a kid in elementary school, an author came to our school who was a Scholastic author. And she was also an illustrator. And I remember she signed my Billy Goat Scruff book, and she actually drew an illustration in the front where she signed it. And I still have that book to this day.
Oh.
And I think I got it when I was
That's
like
amazing.
in first grade. So you're right. If for kids, that kind of shit really matters. Like it means a lot to kids. Because like for them, you're like a celebrity, but also like to, meet someone who wrote something that either you like or you don't know it yet, but you're going to like it. Like that's a big deal. That's really cool. Actually. I love that.
Yeah. And I do feel like one of the things I love about kids graphic novels is that they often have an aesthetic where you can kind of like feel that a person drew this, if you look at like an issue of a Marvel comic, like it might have like beautiful illustration, but like a kid looks at that and they're like, well, I don't even know how a person starts making something that looks like that. But you can read a lot of these graphic novels and, imagine being able to draw like that one day.
Right.
Now you do help kids draw, like right now, because you do cartooning with your co-pilot Peanut.
I do, yeah. I between working on graphic novels, I teach a lot of cartooning classes. So right now I'm just doing free classes at libraries and around the area where I live. But I periodically do online classes, and I also do classes for adults. So this fall August. Yes, I guess that's still summer. I'm doing a class an online weekly class called Make Your Dang Comic. That's for adults who want to kind of get back in that creative headspace and maybe get away from some of the distractions. Because I think one of the things that's kind of funny is like the more I work with kids, the more I'm like, oh yeah, this way of thinking actually, like we could probably apply this to our grown-up selves too, and that'll get us pretty far.
Now, do you actually bring your cat Peanut with you to the library?
I do not. Peanut is not a trained animal, so she's an 18-year-old grumpus. So.
Aww.
So I started during the pandemic. I was doing a lot of online classes, and that was when I started leaning into the Peanut special appearances hard, where my partner would stand just off camera and do her voice, so the kids could ask Peanut questions. And it was really funny because they could not figure out how we did it. They were like, okay, is Kane a ventriloquist? Is there like a recording that's being played? And just the obvious thing of there just being another person there talking was not something they could conceive of.
Oh my God, that's fucking adorable.
So yeah, Peanut has become a local celebrity too, because we use her in a lot of promotional videos for the local library system here. So all these kids are just like, we just incepted into them that that's a famous character, even though it's just my elderly cat.
What is going to happen when your elderly cat dies? These kids are going to be devastated.
That's never going to happen, so we don't need to worry.
Okay. All right, there you go. Believe, receive.
Yeah, it's funny that kids go there quickly, even when she wasn't that old, because I think a lot of people get a pet to kind of try out being parents, right?
Right.
So and then they have a kid. So a lot of kids grew up with an elderly animal. So really, one of the hardest things with dealing with a group of kids, if you mention animal, all their hands go up and they just say like, "We had a cat, but it died. We had a dog, but it died. We had 2 dogs, but one of them died." And you're like, okay, let's give it.
How about some happy memories here?
Yeah, but that's a big experience. I mean, in a way that kind of reflects back on the book that I did an interview with a local radio show here in the Central Coast of California, where the host just couldn't get over that there was a kid's book about divorce. He was like, "Well, this wasn't like the Hardy Boys. Like, why is this so dark?" And like, kids think about dark stuff. They want that reflected in their media.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, I mean, the classic fairy tales are extremely dark. The Brothers Grimm pick dark, very, very dark. So, Hansel and Gretel are abandoned in the woods, and then a witch tries to eat them. Like, this is dark stuff.
Yeah, it's not exactly light and fluffy.
No, dealing with step-parents who want them dead or gone, like really rough stuff. But I think
Snow White's stepmother wants her heart, so yeah.
Yeah. I just think that we, and part of it was like life was truly terrible then, and and so there were real dangers out there that kids needed to be warned about. In a way that the world is not nearly as dangerous for them as it used to be. And so the perils of children's stories are much milder. But kids deal with all sorts of traumatic events all the time. The loss of a grandparent or a beloved pet, the divorce of their parents, their best friend moving away, them moving away. There's a lot of stuff that when you're a little kid that disrupts your everyday routine can be very traumatic for them. So even though it's not, a witch putting you in an oven, it doesn't mean that you don't have real feelings about it and that they don't need to be addressed in some kind of way.
Yeah, it's been interesting seeing there's been such a push to ban graphic novels in particular. There's huge book banning menaces these days all over the place, but graphic novels have often been a focus. I think the visual element makes it easier for someone to go up to city council and wave this book around and be like, look what they're teaching your children. Sometimes often the issue that they're raising is they're usually being racist or homophobic, right?
Sure.
But I think it does also reflect a sort of deeper impulse that like the world is full of things that I don't like the idea of my kid having to deal with that, but they are dealing with that. They are people in the world too, and you need to be intentional about how you explore those issues with kids. But that doesn't mean they're not going to encounter them.
Yeah. Also, I think sometimes people remember their childhoods as being somehow a simpler time where there were no problems around, and they sort of want to impart that on their kids. But it's like, no, you really, if you actually dig into people's upbringings, you'll discover there was any number of traumatic things that happened to them that they just like, oh, I forgot about that, or I pretend it doesn't exist, or, well, that didn't really bother me that much, so it probably wouldn't bother anyone else. It's like, well, the fact that you are able to deal with this well doesn't mean everybody else will either. But, everybody's childhood is going to have some elements of it. I mean, Romaine had a pretty, her parents were married the whole time, and she lived in, basically the same house in town her whole time growing up and everything else. So there was a lot of stability there. But even still, she set her house on fire. She was bullied pretty bad in school. Like, it wasn't like there weren't, traumatic things that happened out on the prairie, even though quite a bit of the other parts of her life growing up were very stable. It doesn't mean that, like, nothing happened.
Right. That's for fucking sure.
But it can seem like it if you only focus on the stable parts. It can seem like, oh, this was easy. It's like, well, there were other things that were going on.
And I think that is where comparing notes with people helps too. Because if you say in passing to someone like, oh yeah, well I set my house on fire as a kid, but blah blah blah, it's going to be like, wait, what? And like, oh, maybe there's more of a story there than I realized.
But also, it's like the thing when you're a kid where you don't know how rich or poor you are until you go to another kid's house.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have like a completely different perspective, or even like you only know your parents, and then you spend time with another kid in your class, their parents, like at a sleepover or dinner or whatever. It is like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, other kids, like I thought we're at the same school, we're a lot alike, that our lives were the same. And then you go to another kid's house, you're like, oh, my life is extremely different.
Yeah. There's a part in my book that pretty much did really happen, where my dad's girlfriend convinced me for a moment, just for a moment, but it happened, that she was actually an alien. And in real life, we've been talking about the TV show V, and so I think she was like, "Yeah, I'm a lizard person like that." And I was like, "Oh shit, is she really? No way, but maybe, no, but maybe." And but I think that because just having another adult with their own perspective and their own values coming into your life, like they may as well be an alien to you,
Right.
Well, there was a brief time when I was a kid that I believed that I was secretly a twin, and that my mother was lying to me, that there was not another me around. And I eventually got to see my birth certificate and checked the box single live birth. I didn't believe it until I saw on my birth certificate.
What the hell made you think you had a twin?
You saw the long form birth certificate?
Yeah, exactly. But I also was got pretty convinced when I was 7, that I was actually aliens had dropped me onto Earth, and that I was not really
That's a good one.
like everyone else. And part of it was, I'm, in some ways I'm very much like my mom, but I'm also, there are definitely aspects of my personality. The more I've gotten to know my biological father's side of the family and everything, blah, 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 I realized that sort of a lot of what I was feeling was, in a lot of ways, I'm not like these people. And as a little kid, I was trying to rationalize, how is it that I'm so different from these people? So there must be other people out there who are like me, like an alien civilization or a twin, a secret twin, someone else who is like me. And then, the gayness also, I think, was a big part of that too, right? Of I am feeling different because I am also different. But so I think that all, kids go through a lot of sort of, their own internal searching about themselves and how they're like their family or not like their family. And certainly, a divorce gives you an opportunity to really see, because once your parents are living apart, you see that they are very different people because they live very differently. And it gives you a totally new perspective on them also as people, because oh, this house is very different from that other house because there are different rules here. There are different taste, different style, different way of doing things. And that can also be a little bit jarring.
Yeah, and you have that, if you are in a long relationship and you break up, you have a moment of being like, who am I without that person? Who could I be without that person, right? And so that can be kind of a manic moment to lean into certain of your impulses. So I think if you're the kid of someone going through that, it puts you at you're getting an odd perspective on a particular time in a person's life.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, since I opened the door on our extended paternal family, I did want to talk about, there was a podcast that came out a couple of years ago called Unwanted Words. And I think I got the name of that right. I got that right? Yes. Unwanted Words by Ryan Estrada. And so why don't you talk a bit about how that podcast episode came about.
Yeah, that was such a journey where so does the audience know the story of your
of his crazy
biological
bio
father?
dad?
So to catch everybody up, my biological father was not in the picture, and then Carol, who is a mother of two of my half siblings, she reached out to my mom now, like 17, 18 years ago, and that opened the floodgates to me, like meeting all of these siblings, and then eventually in learning more about my biological father's family and how little he knew about his own father, led me eventually to his brother, Joe, who is Kane's father. And then they sort of got into the lynch mob cabal, a little like already in progress. And then we did have, because Joe obviously really wanted to meet the brother he had heard about growing up, but had never met. And so we did actually go and meet up with him at his minuscule and depressing church service on Catalina Island. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember being so ready for it to be like, this is his cult compound. It's going to be the end of apocalypse now. And like, no, it's like just disused bank, and we've got three loyal followers here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I for a lot of that story, I felt like mostly an observer, and Derek was the genius behind the scenes, making all these connections and putting everything together. And then I was working on a different graphic novel at the time, and then I thought, this is such an amazing story. I need to figure out how to draw it. So I started doing a comic kind of as it was happening, as we all met for the first time, and kind of trying to put together the backstory. And then I was about to go to the East Coast to go to grad school for cartooning, because there's this tiny school in Vermont that's like the only one of the only places you can get a master's degree in making comics. So I was about to move far away, so I thought, okay, for me, it's going to be hard to get to Catalina after this, or we got to finally do it. So we all started planning to make that happen. And then I became acquainted with a public radio reporter, Avery Trufelman, who is most known for 99% Invisible. And she has another show called Articles of Interest that's about the kind of surprising history of clothing. That's very fun. But Avery came with us to the island. And so we had this funny thing of we confront this guy in church. And it's like, oh my God, you're my son I didn't know about. You're my brother, and who's this? And it's like, oh, she's just a reporter we brought. Which is like added to some of the, he understandably felt ambushed. I think having someone with a literal giant microphone in his face may not have helped that. But the show that Avery was recording for basically decided the story was too complicated and messy to run.
And it is complicated and messy. Like, that's not wrong.
Yeah, I was like, that's fair. It was like they wanted something that'd be really like, a tight 3-minute story. And like, this is not that. It is like, it's a fascinating story, but it's not that. So they didn't end up using the audio. And it was great for me, because then I had all this recording to draw from for my graphic novel, so you can just read that on my website, kanelynch.com. But then we still have this audio, and it was kind of like a shame to not use it. And then Ryan Estrada, who actually is also a cartoonist and has a really wild life, but he had a podcast where it was all about mysterious messages and where they lead you, basically. And for me, this whole story began with a Facebook message from a stranger that sounded like a scam, and that stranger was named Derek Hartley, and happened to be my cousin. So
I'm often accused of running a scam. That's true.
He's a very scammy person. You
A
got
very
careful with
scammy,
that Derek
suspicious AI chatbot. Yeah.
Only
warning
true
people for years.
sometimes. You were the first AI chatbot before it was cool.
I really was.
But yeah, so he did a 2-part audio documentary based on that audio. It was great to finally have that in a finished form, and he's a fantastic narrator. So both of those are on my website together. You can read the comic version, or could go into some detail on things we didn't have audio for, but also embellish a little more versus the audio. That's the true facts.
Yeah, I mean, when it happened, I talked about it on the show.
I was riveted, by the way. I thought it was the most fascinating shit ever.
Yeah, that
the
was
whole
great.
thing was
Really,
super.
your version is hard to compete with.
I mean, but also in some ways, like, I'm glad that we have an audio recording of it because I'm glad we have, because our own memories can be slippery, right? And so it's good to have like an audio recording because then you have there's very irrefutable proof of how things actually went down and the order of that kind of thing. But there are other details like Carol insisting on being incognito with the largest hat I've ever seen in my life, like over in a corner with a giant hat and sunglasses, like, no, I'm incognito here. And it was just like, so there are things like that I almost wish that parts of it were filmed because there were other details about it because only some of us went inside. Other people were outside. And then we had to regroup later and debrief. And I mean, it was just like tense and sweaty and exciting. Like there was so much about it that even the audio can't really convey.
When I was doing, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
When I was doing the comic version, it was my thesis in grad school, and I had a moment where I was in a critique group, and someone just asked me, like, this is, like, supposed to be funny, right? And I just hadn't thought about it. It was like, you know what? You're right. It is supposed to be funny. And I think in retrospect, sometime I hope to kind of brush up that comic again and kind of fill in some things. I mean, I've learned a lot about making art since then. But I think some of those moments, like the hat, like you're saying, are so good. And just like leaning into the comedy of that this is like an impossible situation. And some parts of the story are very sad, but at the end of the day, it's pretty funny.
But that, Carrie Fisher said, if my life wasn't funny, it would just be true, and that would be sad. And so,
that's a great line.
There really is this fine line between, around truth of like funny on one side, sad on the other side. And to me, it is the whole situation is ludicrous. This man running this years-long love scheme on a variety of women and then pretending like he's a completely different person later, and then all of us coming together and then showing up in this bank lobby. Like, it's so, like, everything about it is, if you pitched it as a movie, because this happens a lot in things that happen in real life of like, okay, but if you pitch this as a movie or a TV show, people would say, no, nobody will believe this. It's too stupid. It's too ridiculous. You have to make this more believable. And but all of it is true. It's just ridiculous, and so of course it has to be funny.
It's I remember the part where we were on the ferry, and the previous year we had failed to make it on the ferry, but this time we were on the ferry. And then someone did recon, and they saw him on the boat. He was in like a special section we couldn't access, but we knew he was on the same boat we were. And then the boat docks in Catalina, and we're all like, oh, my God, are we going to be able to catch him getting off the boat? Where's he going to go? And then suddenly we just see him zip by in a golf cart, just like flying.
It was so great.
Not ready for that.
But, like, again, total comedy.
Golf cart,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little did he know what was awaiting for him, at the end. But anyway, so I strongly recommend people listen to the Unwanted Words podcast because you do get to hear sort of the background of what happened, but also like the very real audio of the situation. And it is like, even listening to it back, I was just as captivated as I was in the moment of like, oh my God, what is going to happen here? Because it's, you just really have no idea how he's going to react. And honestly, the three people who comprise his church, I think it was the most incredible day of their lives. Like, I can't even imagine.
Sure.
They're probably still talking about it because I can't even imagine. You have this pastor, you think you know who he is, and then all of a sudden these random people pop up with this shocking, unbelievable story. And
none of you guys have heard from him since, right?
No, my dad reached out to him, but he wouldn't respond.
Yeah. And I emailed him because I had told him at the thing, because I had other pictures. I had pictures of his dad and him as a kid that he didn't have. That Joe had in his dad's suitcase. There were a bunch of photos, and I scanned a bunch of them. And so I told him, because there were like pictures of him as a little kid when he was like 3-4 years old, him with his mom and that kind of thing. So I said I would send them to him because I knew he didn't have those photos. But he, I emailed him, but he never responded back. So, but I sent him that stuff because I made that promise to him, but I didn't expect ever to hear from him again because his wife doesn't know anything about what's going on. And so... yeah, he was not going to continue his involvement with the rest of us, I think.
Yeah, and I want to be careful about implying causality, but he is not in Catalina anymore. So he might have needed to tuck and run after that.
Maybe.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he was not in good shape physically when we saw him. Still alive though, because I'm sure the second he dies, Carol's going to let us all know. But
do we know where he went?
Yes. He is in Virginia.
Oh, interesting. Back to Virginia.
Which is interesting because, that's where my mom met him. That's where I was born. That's where our mutual grandfather lived, and also where he died, later in life, obviously. So, we keep coming back to Virginia, strangely enough. But that's where he is.
There was and then they had another sibling they didn't know about. I don't know if we want to go into that or not.
But, no, I definitely want to go into it because I have not heard.
Okay.
This will be new information to me, and I'm very excited about. But yes, actually, you know what? Yeah, we should talk about that. So, more recently, because I have talked about it on the show, more recently I did. There was a DNA test that popped up on Ancestry.com, and even when I met my siblings, it turns out we had another sibling, Susan, who. Everybody knew that I existed, but they didn't have contact with me. So when I got into the fold, the siblings, that wasn't a surprise. But Susan ended up being a surprise. And it was a surprise to her, too, because she had grown up thinking she was an only child. And then all of a sudden she had 5 siblings. But so we've all been waiting ever since for other siblings to pop up. Like, we find it ludicrous that there's only 6 of us, given, how prolific he was during this time period. And so I still, every time I open up Ancestry, I'm like stealing myself for another sibling. But in this case, it was another sibling for Kane's father and my father who showed up, a woman named Susan. And I talked about sort of my odyssey of trying to contact her. And I, just like I did with Kane, I contacted her daughter who lives in New York City. We have a mutual acquaintance. So I sort of, I sent her a letter at her office, and I was like, hi, you don't know me, but I'm friends with this person that you know. So she, like you, would not necessarily think it was a scam. And I said, look, I think your mom took a DNA test on Ancestry, and I contacted her there, but she may not have seen it because I knew she'd be older. And I just said, if your mom did take this test, I assume she's looking for information about her mother's family because her mother had been adopted. And so I wasn't sure if she knew about her birth father's situation because in all the other records, it seemed pretty clear that her parents were married at the time she was born and she has all these other siblings. So I really did not want to, crack something open with her daughter that was not already known information. So I said, if she's looking for information about her mother's family, I am related and I might be able to help. And she passed my information along to her mom. And I talked to Susan on the phone, and she knew exactly that I was not talking about her mother, that I was talking about her biological father, because she did know this situation about her biological father. So this was new information for Joe, certainly, and it would be for my father too, that they have another sibling, Susan. So talk a bit about this, because you actually met her.
Yeah, and when my grandfather was in his 80s, I did a short documentary on him, and he told me about how because he'd had tuberculosis, he was the only young man in New York City because he couldn't serve in the war. and that he'd take the subway and everyone would be glaring at him thinking, like, why aren't you helping our country? And it turns out there's an advantage to being the only young man in New York City. So that was how he ended up with another secret child. But yeah, so Susan lives in, I don't know if you should say exactly where, but in yeah,
in the
I'm
South.
never sure what do you think is appropriate there. Sure.
In the South. She lives in a southern state on the East Coast.
There you go. In a very cool town, you know. So I think this was what's really striking to me is that if I'm, you know, these are family members, but at the end of the day, meeting a woman close to 80 I've never met before, right? And she was like a really cool hang. She was like an awesome, just delightful person to be hanging out with. She lived in Southern California for many years, and her husband retired to the South, but they're not in some, you know, dusty old folks place in Florida. They have this like beautiful place in a really cool town. They knew all the hot restaurants in town, and they're just like really fun people to spend time with.
Nice.
And so how was it? Because it's so funny with your dad, because all the time he's like, I don't remember anything about my childhood. And then when you actually like ask him questions and everything, all of a sudden he like drops one bomb story after another. And but it takes some teasing out of him to get like details and memories, because it's not like he's not a ready storyteller in that way. Which is interesting, because all the time I'm like this crazy thing and then that crazy thing, like I'm popping out these details all the time, and your dad is so different from me in that way. But how was it for him? Because I'm sure Susan had sort of questions about growing up and their mutual father and everything else.
Yeah, I think that was interesting for him, because her questions were very like, she wanted like the specific biographical details. You know, I think she really wanted the kind of like more logical picture. So that was kind of like her angle on it, kind of like you've been doing, trying to fit together all the pieces. I think that seemed like more what compelled her than the sort of more narrative, colorful stuff about him. But I think they had some good opportunities to trade stories for sure.
And this was a situation where he was an elevator operator in her building, like her residential building or her office building. Is that how Susan's mother met him?
I'm not sure if we know exactly, but he was an elevator operator.
Yes.
So I definitely have, the picture in my head is that he literally met her in the elevator and like gave her a smoldering look. I don't know if that's literally true or if they met somewhere else. But it's a good story.
I mean, it's a good story. I like it.
Well, when I talked to Susan, she said that he was an elevator operator, and that's where she met him. But she didn't specify if it was I assume it was like some kind of, I mean, I know he worked at a hotel for a while, and then I guess he was working as an elevator operator. This is when he was married. You know, his and living with his wife's father and stepmother. So, but I have to imagine that, you know, whatever happened, like if it was her apartment building, for instance, well, it would have been very convenient to just go back to her apartment, because she was, you know, her husband was away at the war, and so she was like alone. And so whatever happened certainly happened in her apartment. But I don't know if she was working and then he was the elevator operator in the building where she worked, or if it was the building that she lived in and he operated the elevator there. But yeah, they met in an elevator. The ups and downs of life.
I have to admit that the cartoon version in my head is that, to put it delicately, their entire relationship was in the elevator, but that's probably not true.
Like
stopped between floors.
Yeah.
What I find most fascinating is that the grandfather was this whore, and then like Derek's dad basically became a whore too. Now, is your dad, Kane, also a whore, or is he just a nice guy?
Well, he might be listening to this, so I got to be careful. No, I mean, well, you know, he did. My graphic novel is about when my dad left my mom for a younger woman he met while he was at a work conference, right? So there's maybe some element of that continues, but I think he's a lot more of a ethically minded person than some of these other fellows.
Gotcha.
Yeah, as I have continued to dig further, our grandfather's own father is a huge question mark because it turns out, based on DNA, his father was not who he thought he was. So it's just psychotic that, whatever this, this whole family lineage, like every generation you go back, it's this same thing over again. And so, whatever it is, it's a pattern. It's been going on for a while.
We went to Ireland for my dad's 70th birthday, and you kind of fucked that up for us, Derek, because we went to Galway, home of the Lynches. And next year we know we're fake Lynches. So.
We are fake Lynches. We are, in fact, crow. You had to eat crow. We can't even be the lynch mob anymore. We got to be a murder of crows, I guess. I don't know what else we can be.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Yeah. So there you go.
I like that.
That'll be our new family moniker. We're a murder of crows, which in some ways actually is sort of befitting because, our grandfather had been told that his father had murdered somebody. Like this was part of his own family lore. Like the reason that his father wasn't around was that he was like this bad person who killed somebody. Like that's a story. Like he threw somebody out a window and a poker game gone bad.
The story was he thought the guy was cheating at cards, so he chucked him out a window.
Okay, yeah. So,
oh, nice. You guys come from
but that's
great
like
stock.
an extremely specific and colorful story that you would, because in my research, I thought, well, this will be very easy to find. And it turns out like it's not true as far as I know, but on the Lynch side, the sort of patriarch on the Lynch side of the family did spend time in prison. So like the Lynches that certainly our paternal great-grandmother was in a relationship with because she had like a postcard from his brother-in-law that she had kept and she named her children with Lynch as a family name. So obviously she was either assuming or wanting people to assume that was the family and the father of two of her children. But that family did have the patriarch, did go to prison for like 5 or 6 years. So there was definitely a sketchy element on the Lynch side of things. But, I guess we'll just have to wait for more DNA to see if we can solve the mystery.
This family drama never ends.
No.
It really doesn't.
I mean, it's going to end a little bit when we find out which crow it is, because I have narrowed it down to 2 brothers. So, but just one of them is younger than the other, and one is a little bit older. But both of them could be the person, because both of them served in World War I. So it definitely could have been a situation where she slept with one of them, and they were going off to war, and she was in this on again, off again relationship with this guy, and it was just easier to say that it was his baby at that point. And, much like Susan's mother, like her husband came home from the war and she was pregnant. And, so, they made a choice at that point about how they were going to address it. And I suspect that our grandfather's, mother was in sort of a similar situation. It was wartime. There was more than one man in the picture. And, a good cover story was, ultimately better than whatever the reality was.
I don't know if it's a weird place to take that, but, growing up in the 90s, there was a lot of media about the 50s. And there was really this idea that, like, the 50s was squeaky clean, even like in Pleasantville, looked like they literally don't know about sex. And and now we're kind of realizing that's probably how it seemed if you were growing up in the 50s and 60s. But like those people were real messy in the 30s and 40s, and then by that point they're trying to put on a squeaky clean face and move on. And sometimes that works better than other times. Yeah.
That's really true. All right. Well, Kane, a delight as always to have you with us to catch up on our family lore.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me. I love hearing these stories because it's absolutely wild.
Yes. And if any more
I was just sorry. I was pondering Romaine's question from earlier, so I feel like I have a better answer now. I think that the thing that makes my dad different from those guys, and Derek, I don't know if you'd say this about yourself as well, is that he's honest to a fault. So whatever, whatever whorishness is in our DNA, I think he's not a bullshitter like those people. So that's maybe where the lineage changed.
Nice.
And that may very well be true. You also have to keep in mind, like, that my biological father, his mother was, like, actually in an institution, like, insane. And so I think some of his sort of, like, fabulous reimagining of himself comes from her own, power to fabulously reimagine herself and her life. And I definitely got, like, that side of things. And you and your dad, even though obviously you're a very creative person, you're a lot more, like, grounded and down to earth. Your dad is a lot more grounded and down to earth.
Yeah.
And you can really tell different moms because you definitely did not get, like, this thread of crazy, even though I'm sure there are other elements from this, this Lynch side that you did get. At least you didn't get, because I really think my biological father has this combination of both being a slut and also somebody with this, intense imagination about themselves that is unique to his mother, and a perfect combination to create this just larger than life, literal and figurative character.
Yeah. And I think anyone who knows you or I, the first thing they say is we're very humble. So
I just think that to me, the most interesting thing is all of us want to tell this story. And the hardest part about it is, what is the entry point of this story? Because everyone comes in at a different point. And the story is like an octopus. There's so many pieces to it and elements, and it stretches back so long. And it's like, what, because that was sort of the issue with Avery, with the documentary. It's sort of the, even for you, I mean, obviously you're writing a piece of your life. I write pieces of my life. Laura wrote a piece of her life. But ultimately, like, this meta story is much harder to tackle. I think what's ultimately going to happen is we're going to have to do some kind of, like, 8-part Netflix documentary, and everyone's going to get their own hour, and it's going to take that long to unspool all of this nonsense. Like, I don't know that there's another way.
And that sounds pretty good. So.
All right. Well, I'll work on that. All right. Kane,
Awesome.
Thanks so much for being with us. Be sure to check out his book, Real Life, a graphic novel by Kane Lynch. It is published by Scholastic, so you can check it out on Scholastic's website, scholastic.com. But it's available everywhere fine books are sold. Pick up a copy for the young person in your life.
Yeah, do it.
And support a Scholastic
you
author.
can read it too. I think it's very it's the book I would write even if I were working for an adult audience too. So I hope all ages can get something out of it.
That's right. Support my cousin in his effort to make his parents proud, and as a financially successful cartoonist.
Yeah, if it's a bestseller, they can't be mad at me. So.
Exactly.
I don't think they ever are, but all right.
No,
and be sure to check out Kane on Twitter X and Instagram. He is Kane with a K, Icarus Lynch, in both of those places. Thanks so much for being with us, cousin.
Kane.
Thanks for having me. Until next time.
That's right. You're listening to Derek and Romaine. Well, there you have it. The end of another perfect episode of Derek and Romaine. And if you want more great fun, go to dnrstudios.com and subscribe to get our show every day. And don't forget, for DNR Plus subscribers, you can use the DNR Cast app for iPhone, available now in the App Store.
Life doesn't pause when you're sick. Vaccines against respiratory illnesses can help protect you and give you more playtime with your best friend. Depending on age and health status, vaccinations for flu, COVID-19, RSV, or pneumococcal infection may be recommended. Vaccines can help keep you from having a rough time. Learn more at cveep.org/vaccines-protect. Brought to you by the American Lung Association and CVEEP, fighting infectious respiratory disease.